Welcome to Schuylkill Intermediate Unit's Transportation Training Module entitled Understanding Students with Exceptionalities. This training module is designed to be completed in approximately 1 hour. The training module is divided into 3 parts. After each part, you will be asked to complete 1 to 2 questions before moving on. A guided notes document has also been provided for you. Once you have completed each part and submitted your answers, a certificate of completion will be emailed to the address you provided. Welcome to the module. School buses and vans transport our most important passengers, children. Parents and caregivers are asked every day to entrust their children to transportation operators. We understand the importance and significance of your job as a transportation operator, and we thank you for your service. This training module is meant to extend your knowledge of some of the students you transport daily. A note about this training. This module is intended to help support staff such as transportation operators deepen their knowledge of diverse learners. It is important for support staff to learn about specific district or intermediate unit policies regarding their roles and responsibilities. Also, support for individual students is decided by the special education team and IEPs. This includes transportation needs. Please check with your school district or the intermediate unit for more specific information about students. There are 3 parts to this training module. After each section, you will be prompted to answer questions before moving on. The topics covered include students with exceptionalities, person-first language, and presuming competence. Section 1, students with exceptionalities. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, commonly referred to as IDEA, requires public schools to provide special education services to all eligible students. This includes academic services as well as other services such as transportation. IDEA covers 13 broad disability categories, and our students exist on a continuum of complexity within these categories. Today, we will not cover all 13 categories defined by IDEA, but instead focus on the most prevalent types of disabilities of students likely to be on school buses and vans. Although all students with disabilities are unique, students with disabilities are likely to share some common characteristics, including differences in communication, differences in learning, and even how they view their surroundings. In education, we recognize that students identified with disabilities often communicate differently because of their disabilities. They also have good and bad days, perceive their environment differently, and most importantly, they learn differently. When thinking about a student's behavior, communication, or even a perception of a scenario, it is important to remember that the very nature of a student's disability may not allow them to view or engage in the same way as adults without disabilities or even as adults. The first category we will discuss today is autism spectrum disorder. Autism spectrum disorder is an umbrella term that is used to describe a developmental disability, and this classification covers a wide range of symptoms. They mainly affect a child's social and communication skills, but can also impact behavior. To learn a little more about autism spectrum disorder, we will view this brief video. Temple Grandin was diagnosed with autism as a child. In this video, she talks about how her mind works, and she shares her ability to think in pictures, which helps her solve problems that neurotypical brains might miss. This slide gives some additional information to help better understand students with autism spectrum disorder. Students with ASD communicate and behave differently than their peers. Often, students are unable to communicate verbally when they are angry, hurt, or even in need of something such as a drink. Instead, they may kick, yell, or even harm themselves. It is important to view these behaviors as a form of communication, not simply as the student being bad. When working with students with ASD, it is important to not take behaviors personally. As adults, this can be very difficult, especially when multitasking, such as driving a school bus or van. In the interest of everyone's safety, it is best to ignore certain behaviors when it is not a safety issue. Students with ASD may not always be able to verbally respond or give eye contact. Although these are social norms we come to expect, it is important to understand that not all students are able to communicate in that way. In the event a behavior must be stopped or corrected, use the fewest words possible and do not give choices. Clearly state the behavior you are expecting. For example, if a student unlocks his seatbelt, you might try to say, "Please put your seatbelt on," or even "seatbelt on." Being direct will help students understand the expectations. Another IDEA disability category is emotional disturbance. Students identified with ED have an inability to learn that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or other health factors. These students have an inability to build or maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships and may also engage in inappropriate types of behavior or have feelings that are under normal circumstances not what we would expect. In order to better understand and interact with students with emotional disturbance, consider these ideas. Students with ED often struggle with forming and maintaining relationships. It may take a long time for a student with ED to feel comfortable enough to engage with adults. Relationships with ED students are built on trust, empathy, and mutual respect. Try to build rapport with the students by modeling these concepts. Students with emotional disturbance also respond well to specific praise. It is important to recognize when students are engaged in appropriate behaviors, and pointing out the behaviors helps. Using phrases like "thank you for sitting quietly," or "great job remembering to buckle your seatbelt," or "I'm glad you are using a quiet voice," will help reiterate those appropriate behaviors. It is important to keep predictable routines and schedules. For example, if a new route to school must be taken or a new student is going to be entering the bus, try to let the student know as soon as possible. Again, it is important to view misbehaviors as a communication and avoid taking these behaviors personally. Carol Ann Tomlinson, an educator, author, and speaker, found through her research that 90% of misbehavior is prevented simply by building a relationship with students. So how can we build relationships with students? First, by building rapport. Make a genuine effort to get to know your students. Asking them questions about family and friends, successes, things they like, shows that you are interested in them. And generally, these topics are things that they enjoy discussing. It opens communication. Another way to build relationships with students is to be positive. Students will automatically respond more positively when the atmosphere around them is also positive. Try to state expectations or rules positively. So instead of saying, "Don't stand up," try saying, "Stay in your seat." This is positive and it directly states the behavior you want to see. Again, be sure to give lots of positive praise when students follow these expectations. The next IDEA category we will cover is intellectual disability. Students with this disability have below average intellectual ability and general low functioning. They may also have low communication, self-care, and social skills. Students identified with an intellectual disability may need more time to learn a task with lots of repetition. This includes procedures such as getting on and off of transportation. Students may need to be reminded every day of where to sit or to buckle their seatbelt. Students may also have difficulty applying learned information to new situations. For example, if a student with this disability learns to use a vending machine in the cafeteria, we can't assume they will be able to use one in the mall. We may have to teach that skill separately. Similarly, if a student understands to sit while the van is moving, they may need to be retaught this skill if they begin to ride on a bus. The next IDEA category is traumatic brain injury, often referred to as TBI. This is a brain injury caused by an accident or some sort of physical force. This term is not used for a person born with a brain injury or a person who experienced a brain injury during birth. Students with TBIs often have difficulty with memory, attention, language, thinking and reasoning skills, and appropriate behavior. Students with TBIs may have significant memory issues and also easily become distracted. Students with TBIs often become tired, especially after a full day of school. Students with TBIs may need instructions broken into smaller steps and repeated often. For example, a student may need to be told the steps to entering a bus every afternoon at dismissal. The final category we will discuss in this module is multiple disabilities. This IDEA category includes students who have one or more of the 13 conditions covered under the Act. This can include hearing and visual impairments or physical disabilities paired with other categories, such as autism spectrum disorder or an intellectual disability. Often, these students use equipment such as wheelchairs, communication devices, and even feeding tubes and other medical equipment. When transporting these students, you may receive additional training on how to safely lift and position the students. You may also be given information about how to handle certain medical issues, such as seizures. If students have personal care aides or nurses, they may be able to offer you further support. This ends the first section of the transportation training module. Please complete the questions in this section prior to moving on to section 2.